Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, Rob. We're going to go ahead and get started with this. This is a presentation for active shooter, for mass shootings, and for workplace violence. So if you were here for the pottery class, you're in the wrong room. We're going to try to get through this. Hopefully my voice will carry on. We've had one class already earlier today, and we're going to do the very best to get through it. Bear with me. This is going to be the second time that I've actually taught this curriculum, and there's two reasons for that. One, I just made the class. We just finished it about a week ago, so all the information on here is going to be as up to date as I can possibly get it as of September the 19th. So some of the statistics that you're going to see are as up to date as we possibly can. And two, this is a brand new idea for the county, so we have just developed this class for the county specifically based on some of the requirements and the things that they asked me to put into the class. So a little bit about me. I'm a Texan, misplaced, misguided, whatever you want to call it, but I'm here, love it, and that might be why you hear a little bit of a drawl or slang, and we're just going to have to bear with me on that one. I can't change that. But I did 4 years active duty in the Marine Corps from 1999 to 2003, one tour in Iraq. I spent 8 years at the VCU Police Department prior to coming out here to Powhatan. I'm working on my 4th year here in Powhatan. And of my police career, I've spent about 8 years of that in training. Training is my passion, and the three things that I enjoy most in training is the defensive tactics, the firearms, and then this class, this active shooter class. We're going to go into it as far as some of the things that we're going to expect out of the class. The purpose of the class is to address the issue of those three things we talked about and hopefully allow you to walk out of here thinking about things that will make you a hard target. We're going to go into detail as to what that entails and what specifically I mean by a hard target, but we're going to discuss the following categories: current events, human response to crisis, preparedness versus paranoia, some terms and definitions to include a little bit of history, a little bit of statistics, what you can do, what law enforcement's going to do, why we have these situations, the terminology see something, say something, concealed carry, and again, hard targets. So hard targets is going to be one of the things that we want you to really walk out of this class with. My goal is to take a very somber subject, something that's terrible to talk about, something that's terrible to think about, something that is slammed in our face every day, something that's this horrific. I want to take it and make it as palatable as possible for you, the audience, to understand, retain, and go away from here thinking about some things that might help you be that hard target or help you stay safe in your workplace environment or any environment. I want you to think. I want to give you some ideas. None of this is guaranteed to work. It's never going to be guaranteed to work. I can give you as much information as I've been able to gather through the years of studying and training and everything else that I've done to get to this point, but nothing's a guarantee, okay? None of these are going to be perfect in every situation. It's something that you as an individual have to develop and adapt to the circumstances that you're faced with in order to make it work for you. And like I said, there's no perfect answer to every situation. There's only the decision that you make in the moment which makes that the right answer for you. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions throughout this. They're rhetorical. Please don't feel the need to raise your hand and rat yourself out. If it's something that you want to, make the world known that you think a certain way on it, that's fine. But don't feel like you have to acknowledge or answer the questions. They're going to be rhetorical questions. And this is about a 2-hour class. Lots and lots and lots to talk about, all right? So I'm not going to be breaking. It's about as long as I can keep drinking water and having these lozenges. We're not going to have a break. But that being said, if you need to get up to use the restroom, stretch, or take a cell phone call, please go ahead and feel free to do that. I just ask that you silence your cell phones for me, and if you need to make that call or take that call, please step out to the back. All right, let's move right into it. Let's talk about guns just briefly. We're going to mention a little bit more about it in a little bit, but just talk about guns. I bet everybody could recognize that one up there from the one that kills everybody. That's the mass murderer right there. That's the M4 or an AR-15 variant. It's the one that the media tells you is the culprit and the responsible party for just about every shooting that we've had recently. Then we got the old classic 870 shotgun and the Glock 22. Very common weapons. They're all right here on this table. They're all made safe. There's red flags in it to indicate that there's nothing in the chamber. They're laid out here for a reason, though. I want y'all to watch this table. Throughout the entire course of this lecture, I want you to watch this table. Watch those guns for me. I want to show you something just a little bit later in the presentation with them. All right, let's talk about some current events. If you look at the news, it doesn't take long to find something that has something to do with either a mass shooting, a mass murder, an active shooter, or workplace violence. Something is going on in the news all the time. And here are just a few of the examples of recent events. You look at August 31st in Odessa, Texas, where we had 8 dead and 23 wounded. August 4th in Dayton, Ohio, 10 dead, 17 wounded. On that day alone, there were 4 mass shootings in the United States, 2 of which were in Chicago, Illinois. So on one day, we had 4 mass shootings here in the United States. August 3rd, El Paso, Texas, 22 dead, 24 wounded. July 28th, Gilroy, California, 4 dead, 17 wounded. May 31st, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 13 dead, 4 wounded. As of September 19th, 2019, there have been 303 mass shootings in the United States. 303. This year. There have been 16 in Virginia. 7 in the D.C. area, 4 in Virginia Beach area, 2 in the Richmond area, 1 in Suffolk, 1 in La Crosse, and 1 in Hurt, Virginia. So 16 in Virginia. There were 269 mass shootings in the year 2014, 335 in 2015, 382 2016, 346 2017, and 337 in 2018. 337 in 2018, and we're at 303 so far this year. All right, now let's talk about active shooters. And we're going to go into, in the definitions here in just a minute, and explain the difference between a mass shooting and an active shooter, okay? The reason I want you to pay attention to that, there's 2 different studies here. The active shooter, which we'll explain in a minute, is slightly different than the mass shooter. And we'll go over it just for you to understand when you hear the media talking about it. A lot of times they get it wrong, but we'll go over it. But this is a different study altogether. This is the study of the number of active shooter events from 2000 to 2018. There were 277 total incidents, 30 in the year 2017 alone, 30. And out of that 30, in 2017, you had 729 wounded or killed. That's a big number. 729 wounded or killed in 2017. So now let's talk about the human response to these crises. How do we deal with it? I want you to think back to 9/11. Think back to September 9th, or September 11th, 2001. Where were you? I bet the majority of you are capable of knowing exactly where you were on that date. You'll never forget that date, nor should you. And every year since then, we've memorialized that date. For 18 years, we've memorialized that date so that we will constantly have that as a reminder to be vigilant against this terrorist activity that's trying to hurt our country, our world that we live in. We've been vigilant to that. We're resilient creatures, though. We've been designed in a way that we can overcome these obstacles, these tragedies, these crises. We learn to cope. We'll never forget, but most of us have the ability to move on and to live a normal life, especially if you're not one of the ones that was directly impacted by one of these events. In other words, if you weren't involved, your family wasn't immediately involved, most people are capable after one of these tragedies of continuing a normal life. They're not going to suffer from the PTSDs and the things of that nature, the mental illnesses that come from extreme trauma. That's what most people are able to do. So why do I mention that in this class? I want you to think about 9/11 and the tragedy and consider our healing after that. Just like any scar that you have ever gotten from childhood all the way on, when that heals, it heals with thicker skin than it had before. We become calloused. We become calloused to the events that we see on the news and in the media. Now I want you to think about Columbine High School and the horror that was. That gripped the country for a long time. To my knowledge, and in my lifetime, I was actually in high school whenever that took place. That's the only event in my lifetime that I'm aware of up till that point where there was an active shooter or active shooters that took or attacked a high school or a school, a public school of any kind. It was a horrific event for the country, for everybody. It affected everybody in some way. It's not something that we were accustomed to seeing on TV. It wasn't in the news. Ever since then, we've got Sandy Hook Elementary School. We got Sutherland Springs, Texas Church Massacre, the Las Vegas Harvest Music Festival, Virginia Beach. All of these events take place, and every time we see it on TV, it calluses us just a little bit more. We become a little bit more resilient to the shock and awe of it. All of these events have been horrific, and I'm not in any way trying to make one less than the other. I'm not trying to suggest for any stretch of the imagination that any one of these particular events that have happened since 9/11 or since Columbine are any less significant. What I'm trying to make you understand is that we as a human have calloused ourselves to that because we've been exposed to it so much. It doesn't affect us the same way. What is that noise? Y'all hear that? Who's got their cell phone on? I asked y'all to turn your cell phones off. Do y'all mind? I mean, seriously, this is an important class. What are y'all doing? I'm just playing, guys. I'm just playing. But if you could, try to locate where that noise is coming from. Anybody see it? Can y'all do me a favor? Can you open that bag right there and tell me what's in it? And somebody in the back, go ahead and open that bag that's in the back there. Should be a bag back there. And then there's one more right up here in the middle of the hall, just kind of sitting in one of the seats there. If y'all could, just open that up. Go ahead and open it up. Pull it out for me. That was my attention getter. Anybody ever seen Smokey and the Bandit? Never mind. That's my attention getter, all right? We're going to go back to this, and a little bit later we're going to address what just happened. But I want y'all to be thinking about it. All right, so all of these events that we've just discussed have been horrific in nature. They've all been covered by the media extensively by the media. You've seen it slammed in your face every time you turn on the news. And each one of those events has calloused us just a little bit more and a little bit more, so much so that it's not as shocking to us whenever we have something that comes on the TV screen. Oh, there's another high school that just got shut up. Oh, there's another business that just had an active shooter in it. It doesn't affect us the same way as it did the first time. That's what I'm trying to get you to understand. Not that it's less important, but just that it's a human nature for us to callous ourselves to these exposures. Desensitization occurs when you are exposed to something for extended periods of time. And that does not necessarily mean that you're exposed to it hour on hour on hour. That means that you've seen it throughout the course of your life over and over and over again, so that it's not new. It's something that you're used to seeing. It's not a surprise. I want you to pay attention to that term, desensitization. Desensitization. We're going to go over it here. Talk about it a little bit in the light of what we were discussing as far as our ability to cope and overcome crisis. And we're going to see it in a couple of different lights here in just a little bit as we go through the slideshow here. But in essence, the exposure that we receive from the media on the events such as mass shootings desensitizes us to the horribleness of it. It's a coping mechanism that enables us as humans to endure. Moving on. Let's talk about preparedness versus paranoia. Preparedness versus paranoia. I want you to be prepared because preparedness is good. Being prepared is having a plan of action for the unthinkable event that could potentially happen, okay? You watch these scenes on TV. You see the things that happen in the high schools, in the churches, in the businesses, and you learn from them. You have to. You have to learn from them. You have to look at it and say, what can I do to make myself prepared for that circumstance and that situation? And we're hopefully going to give you some ideas for that here in just a minute. But make yourself a hard target. Know how to defend yourself. Take classes on it. You're here in a class that's going to give you kind of a generic overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about workplace violence and mass shootings and that sort of thing. But use this as a stepping stone. This is not going to give you all the answers. It's not going to have you prepared for any and every situation. Hopefully it's going to have you thinking about what you need to do to be prepared for those. But this is not the class for that. Continued education. Continued education. Take classes on active shooter. Take classes for medical purposes. Think about that for a second. Think about the response time that it's going to take law enforcement to get to where you're at in the event of an active shooter or in an event where somebody's come in and hurt people. Law enforcement respond as quickly as they can to situations, but it takes time. We're not going to be there the second that it happens. So anything that you can do to help save your life is what you need to be thinking about. That's what we're trying to get to you. We want you to take classes. We want you to understand, how do I stop the bleeding? On myself, on my coworker, on somebody that's in the hall with me? How do I stop the bleeding? So you can take classes. You don't have to be a doctor, a nurse, EMS, firefighter, police to take these classes. You can go on YouTube and figure out how to apply a tourniquet. I would recommend that you have somebody that knows what they're doing tell you that you're doing it right, but you can take the classes online and be proficient at it enough where ultimately you're trying to stop the bleeding. Whenever it stops bleeding, you've applied it properly. But think about those things. Take CPR classes. Most of the people that die in these situations die from exsanguination, which is the loss of blood. It's not altogether often that these are incapacitating shots that would have resulted in death other than the exsanguination of blood. So being able to stop that bleeding is extremely important, and being able and aware of how to do that for yourselves can save your life, whether it's in an active shooter situation or whether it's in an accident in the kitchen. Something that can happen to you. This is all classes that can help you throughout life. It doesn't necessarily have to be the active shooter. And then play the what. And we're going to go into a great deal of detail of what I mean by the what if game, but just so you get an idea for it and can be thinking about it, I taught academies and I've taught women's self-defense classes. In each one of those, I strongly emphasize the what if game. We'll explain it in a little bit, but just think about what that could mean. Paranoia, on the other hand, is bad. Paranoia is the fear that terrorists and terror seeks to impart. It's what we as human beings experience every time there's a horrific event that causes us to alter in any way our normal life. If it changes who you are or how you respond to circumstances because you're fearful or anxious and you can't perform a daily function without being fearful or anxious, that's paranoia. That's what terrorists intend to do. They want to scare you, so even though you might not be directly impacted by the event itself, you weren't there, your family wasn't there, thank God for that, but it still can have that impact of terror, that impact of fear that overcomes a person and cripples them from performing their normal daily life. So how do we overcome paranoia? You become prepared. You focus on what things you can do as a human being for yourself to prepare yourself for the unthinkable event, in the event that you ever are faced with it. So looking at a couple of terms and definitions, I told you we're going to discuss what the term and definition for mass shooting, mass killing, and active shooter are. And the reason I want to bring this up is because, like I said, a lot of times you see it in the media or you hear these terms and it's not always clear what they mean. What's the difference between them? So I'm just going to give you what the FBI views as the definition, acceptable definition for these different terms. Mass shooting is an incident where 4 or more people are wounded or killed. 4 or more people are wounded or killed. A mass killing requires 3 or more deaths. 3 or more deaths. That's a mass killing. An active shooter, on the other hand, can be either one of those. But the difference between a mass shooting and a mass killing, whenever referencing an active shooter, is that an individual has to actively be engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined or populated area, and it has to be an ongoing event at the time of the report. It's indiscriminate targets. Its intent is to cause as much death as possible in as short amount of time as possible. That's the difference between an active shooter in a mass shooting or a mass killing. It has to be taking place at the time of the report. And that's going to have an impact on the response that law enforcement gives to the situation and to the scene. So quickly looking at the history, we've got the FBI began to track active shooter statistics after the Columbine High School massacre. This took place in Littleton, Colorado back in 1999. Police tactics were revised and continue to evolve. So prior to Columbine, the standard police procedure for responding to an event such as an active shooter in a building was to form a perimeter around that building. We're going to apply as much law enforcement in a circumference around that building to ensure that the bad guy does not get out, into the public. And then they set up this perimeter and they waited on SWAT to get there. That was procedure. That's what we trained our officers to do back then. And that's exactly what they did in Columbine. And as we mentioned before, police response has different time frames associated with it. But what happened with that was there was an extended amount of time between when they got there and set up a perimeter and when the SWAT team arrived and was able to actually make entry into the building and start addressing the actual threat, which was the people that were killing inside the building. So we had an extended amount of time where law enforcement was on the perimeter but not inside the building. So what did we do? We changed that. Now we teach everybody in law enforcement, if you're the first person on scene, you are going in that building. If you're the second person on scene, you're going in that building. If you can get there at the same time, great, 3 of you go in the building. But you're going in the building to address the shooting. We're trying to stop the shooter. That's the goal. That's the goal of law enforcement. We're going to go into specifics on that, but I just need you to understand kind of how this has evolved. So we evolved from setting a perimeter to making entry back or ever since 1999. Fast forward to the Virginia Tech shooting. The lesson we learned from that was not that we needed to get in the building, but what happens whenever they chain the building shut and we can't get in the building. So what do we have to do? We have to learn in law enforcement how to breach doors, how to get into a building that's been fortified, for lack of a better word, to prevent us from getting in there. So they were stalled once again. Law enforcement was stalled once again from being able to get into an area that they needed to in order to stop the killing, which allowed for more killing to take place. Now we train officers in breaching techniques, and a lot of patrol cars are equipped with bolt cutters, which would have been very important back then. But every time we have one of these incidents, we try to learn from it, and we try to implement new training that will help law enforcement provide a better service for the community. That's the goal. Unfortunately, we're always behind the 8 ball because every time we learn something from an incident, the next incident has something new that we have to learn. We're being as proactive as possible, but you have to understand that these people that are committing these crimes are doing it in ways that we've never seen before. So we're constantly having to learn. Virginia Beach, there was a key card access issue. We couldn't get in because of the key card access. Things to think about whenever you're looking at this. So what have we changed in recent years? We train law enforcement extensively. We've trained with active shooter classes where that's the sole purpose of the training. In the academy, they get some active shooter training. What are we doing different now? We're training you guys. We're trying to get as much information to the citizens so that they can be the first responder to themselves. They can take care of themselves, have ideas, understand what their options are, and you have options. You need to understand what they are and when you can utilize them. That's what we try to do in these trainings. And that's what we hope that you'll be able to take away from it. A few things to look at on the graph. We're not going to go into everything, but you can look and see. A lot of times you think of active shooter, you think of the school buildings. That's typically because that's one of the most horrific things that you can imagine. But if you look at the chart there, you can see that Commerce is where the majority of the active shooter events have actually taken place. Government is on the lower end there at 10%. House of worship or churches, you're at 4%. But it's an interesting statistic. So we talked about a minute ago the statistics on how many mass shootings we've had. And 2016, we had the highest number. 2017, it went down. 2018, it went down. Lower number of mass shootings, mass killings, But look right there, 2017, for the active shooter incidents, we had 138 people killed, 591 wounded. That's in active shooters. Look at the statistics. They continuously increase. That's a trend. That's something that you need to watch because it's not going to get better. It's going to continue to get worse unless we look at culture change, which we'll talk about briefly. But look at that, 2017. Guess where that was? Las Vegas. That's where the majority of those casualties came from, was the Las Vegas shooting. Something to gather from this. Look at the hours between 9:30 and 10:30. That is your peak hour for incident. We cannot tell you exactly when this is going to take place. We can't tell you where it's going to take place. We can't tell you that your percentage is going to be within the 6 a.m. to the 3 p.m. time frame. But we can look at the statistics and tell you that that's the majority of the time where it's at. And somebody tell me, why do you think those times are the ones that are picked for these mass killings and this mass shooting? Exactly. They know that if they go to the admin building at 2 o'clock in the morning, the chances of them getting to kill a bunch of people is none. So they're going to wait until you're there. They're going to wait until you've had your morning coffee and you're sitting there at your desk, zoned out in email, so that they can come in and have as target-rich environment as they possibly can, so that they can impart as much pain and hurt as they possibly can in a short amount of time. These people that do this, they know they're on a lose game. They're not coming out of this alive, either by their own bullet or by a police bullet or by a citizen bullet. Their chances of survival are low. Few people get arrested for these crimes. Most of them come out in body bags. They know that. So what they're attempting to do is cause as many casualties as they possibly can in the short time they have before they die. That's their goal. So what can you do? Run, hide, fight. That is the go-to that I'm sure most of you have probably heard before. If you do some looking around on the internet, you're going to find terms like avoid, deny, and defend, which is the exact same thing. It's a marketing issue, or more correctly put, it's political correctness, because not everybody can run, so we want to make sure that we don't offend anybody and say we're going to avoid the bad guy. Hiding sounds like you're a coward, so we're going to deny them access to us. And fighting, that's just violent. We don't want to be violent people, so we're just going to defend ourselves. That's the reason behind the terminology change. But they're the exact same thing. Same principles apply. Running or avoiding. You want to leave the area? Come on, guys. What's the quickest, easiest way to avoid getting shot? Don't be there. Get out. If you have that option, please leave. It's that simple. If you can get out, get out. Know where you're going, though. Know where the exits are, where they lead. Where can you go once you get outside the building that's a safe zone? Notify and encourage all persons you come in contact with to leave with you. But here's the caveat to that. Like we said earlier, the decision that you make at that particular moment is yours and yours alone. You're the only person that can decide whether you want to run, hide, or fight. You, the individual, are the only person that can decide that. So if I, the individual, decide that I'm going to run for it, and I tell you, the individual, hey, come with me, we're going to run. And you're like, no, I want to hide. I'm not going to stand there and argue with you. That's fine. Good luck. I'm out of here. All right? That's what we want. We want you to be able to try to encourage people to do what you feel is right for you. But if they've chosen not to, don't sit there and argue with them. That's their choice. Don't make that decision for them. You go. You go. Don't have an argument. Convince them. Say, hey, let's go. All right, see you later. Mom, I'm gone. Don't get sucked into an argument because you never know when the person's coming around the corner. Know the areas where you can find shelter or safety. A lot of the areas around here have these brick structures around the dumpsters to kind of curb appeal, make it not look as trashy. Bricks are good. Bricks are really good places to get away from bullets. Consider those things. And once you're in a safe area, then's when you call 911. We're going to talk in depth about what you should say when you're on the end with 911, but get there. If unable to leave the area, then your next best option is to hide in place or find an area that provides you the most cover and take shelter in there. Deny the shooter the access to you. So know which rooms are best for protection. Know how you can secure that room. Does the room have locks? Obviously, if it does, lock them. If it doesn't, figure out a way to secure it by other means. Moving furniture, blocking the door, tying the door off. Turn out the lights, silence your cell phone. Remain quiet and low, get down on the ground. Know the difference between cover and concealment. So the model I used earlier, the difference between cover and concealment. If I'm hunting deer, I want to conceal myself from the deer. I'm not overly concerned that the deer is going to shoot back. I don't need to be concerned that the bullets that the deer are shooting at me are going to hit me. That's not feasible. But camouflage is a form of concealment. In other words, if the person can't see you, then they're just going to be shooting indiscriminately into a room. So concealment's good. Concealment's good. But you know what's better? Cover. Because cover prevents the bullets from coming through. And let me tell you something, drywall is not cover. Drywall is not cover. Bullets pass through drywall. So if you've got a room that is all brick and you've got a room that is all drywall, pick the brick room. Pick the brick room. Use the cover. Stay in there. Avoid windows. Rooms that have windows. Don't use windows because windows allow people to see in. And we don't want them to see you. If you're hiding and you feel it's safe to call 911, then by all means call 911. Let them know where you're at. But do so quietly. Make sure your phone's on silent. No vibrators. Know when you should come out of hiding. When do you think you should come out of hiding? When the bullets stop firing into your room? When you stop hearing gunfire? You come out of hiding whenever the law enforcement comes and says, anybody in this room, hands up, come out. That's when you come out of hiding. Make sure that you understand that. You want law enforcement to instruct you to come out of the room, okay? Because you don't know where the person is. You don't know if the scene's secure. Law enforcement's not going to make you come out of that room if that area is not secure. Here's some commercial apparatus that are available for securing doors. I don't advocate any of them, but it's just to give you an idea that there are items out there for use on different types of doors. But if you don't have any of those, consider other options. If you've got a door that's on a return, something similar to these side doors here, something as simple as a belt over it will slow it down. I'm not going to tell you that it's going to stop it, because if you pull hard enough, it probably will break the belt. PVC pipe, another very cheap and convenient thing that you can have just stuck in the in a drawer somewhere that's available to you whenever you absolutely need it. Put it over the top of the triangle piece there, the return, and it will, at the very least, slow them down. And a lot of times what we're looking at whenever you've got somebody that's going through a room indiscriminately shooting, unless you are the original target, they're probably not going to waste a lot of time looking to get into a door that's difficult to open. They're trying to get as many people hurt as possible in a short amount of time, so they'll pass by. That's what we're hoping for. That's what you're looking for, becoming that hard target. Okay, fight and defend. If you're given the option, the only option, of fight or die, please fight. And fight like your life depends on it, because it does. If you have the only option is to fight, then you need to be able to fight, and fight with 100% commitment. You can't do it at 75% commitment. You can't do it at 80% commitment. You have to be 100% committed to win that fight. Okay? That's a decision that only you can make, and that's a decision that you need to make before you have the incident. You have to be able to understand that these things, that these uncomfortable things that you have to think about need to be thought about before the incident, before the situation where you have to make that decision. Already have it in your mind that if I'm faced with a life or death situation and somebody's going to try to prevent me from going home to my family, I'm going home to my family. And I don't care what I have to do in order to accomplish that goal. That's the mindset that I'm talking about. That's the mindset that you have to have already engaged and already assured yourself that you're willing to take in the event that it comes up. Use what's around you for weapons: belts, scissors. Oh, sorry about that. Fire extinguishers, chairs, staplers, whatever. Whatever you got. Look around your office. Look around your workplace. What can you use to defend yourself? What kind of weaponry can you make happen out of what you have available to you at the time? Be decisive and committed. We already talked about how important it is to be committed. I can't stress that enough. You cannot go into that half-heartedly. If you do, you will fail. And a lot of people will ask, well, what if I get... You're going to get shot anyway. You might as well die trying. Think about that. Bullets don't always kill people. You can be a strong survivor, but go into it understanding that the only way you can guarantee a chance at survival is to be 100% committed to surviving. Again, a decision that you have to make and something that you have to make ahead of time. The moment of truth is not the time to make that decision. Something to think about throughout your day. Attack vulnerable areas. Grow in an eyes, neck, break a knee, break an elbow. But don't stop until they are completely incapable of causing more harm to you or anybody else. Do not stop. Just because they might be rendered unconscious, that does not mean they're dead. If you incapacitate somebody, make sure you have incapacitated them. Tie them up. Get their weapon away from them. I don't care if their head is sitting over here and their body is over here. Tie their hands up and get that weapon away from them. You'd be surprised what a committed person can do with multiple bullet holes in them. They can still hurt you. They can still come after you. It's like squashing that wasp and then getting stung by it. They're still capable. Recruit the help of others. Have a plan of attack, all right? So if you're in a room and you've got multiple people and it's do or die, you're now faced with you're the next room on the list of the person coming down the hallway. What are you going to do? Communicate with one another. Hey, don't look good. We're fixing to have some visitor in here and we don't want it. What are we going to do? Have some form of a plan of attack so that you don't take each other out in the process of trying to take the bad guy out. Think about it. Talk to one another. Communicate. Secure the person and the weapon. I can't emphasize that enough. Secure the person and the weapon. Here's a little quick showing of the concept of using improvised weapons. We got a guy up in the top left who is using the fire extinguisher to temporarily disable the individual. That's not going to stop the threat, though. He better hope that he turns that around and uses the metal end and bashes him across the head a few times, okay? Then look at the second picture. That's a little group effort. We got somebody that's decided they're going to do the manhandling. Then we got some Windex spray and another fire extinguisher. Think about the different items that you have available to you to use for weaponry, and then think about how you can use them and what you would aim at if you had that option. All right, guys, I'm going to take about 5.5 minutes to catch my breath while y'all watch a 5.5 minute video that is going to discuss everything that we've just talked about. It's going to show it in a drama environment. This is not a video that's secret. You can find it on YouTube anywhere you want to. If you want to watch it for just relief whenever you get home, it's available. But please watch it. It's going to really recap everything that we just discussed.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority.
Stop that guy! Stop that guy! Hey!
Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911.
Yes, we're here to watch this video. Help us! Help us!
If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly.
Left, license, get my back.
The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
All right, so I told you I was going to go over 911 calls. Let's look at that real quick. You got to know what you want to say whenever you call 911. It's not the panic, hey, I need help, I need help. We know you need help. What we need is information, and we need information that's going to get to our dispatcher that they can get to law enforcement in a timely manner. So it needs to be accurate information. So what to say? Don't assume anything. Don't assume anything. Don't assume that the person that you're running with tells you they saw somebody wearing a red shirt that was shooting at somebody else. If you didn't see it, it didn't happen. If you're on the phone with 911, that didn't happen. You only report what you personally have seen. Only the facts, only what you've seen personally. Where is the shooter? What does he look like? What's he wearing? Again, please do not assume anything. It's how bad information gets out. Can you see injured persons? Where? How many? If you're no longer in the area, what time did you see this? And where are you? What to do when the police come where you are. Don't move. Don't move until you're told to do so. Obey their command. Keep your hands visible and don't have anything in your hands. Don't have keys in your hands. Don't have a cell phone in your hand. Don't have anything in your hand because law enforcement's looking for somebody with a gun. They're hyped up. It's an intense situation. Don't have anything in your hand that even remotely could be misconstrued as a weapon, and don't try not to make very furtive movements with your hands. Make your hands move quickly. Try to remain as calm as possible. Yeah, right. I mean, somebody's shooting in my building, people are dying around me. I'm not going to be calm. I can promise you that. This mentally ahead of time, the chaos will be kept to as minimal as possible. So being able to prepare yourself mentally for this will help you be able to respond in as calm a fashion as possible. Please don't get offended when the officer barks at you and tells you to do something and he's not polite and he's not nice. He's got a job to do. He wants to get you into a safe area. He wants to get his people into a safe area, and he wants to go home at the end of the night too. He doesn't have time to sit there for niceties. This is the time that you listen to what they say, how they say it, do what they're told. Don't be offended. It's not personal. We'll go have a beer later in the evening and talk about it. If I offend you, I'm sorry. But that's not the point. The point is you follow their directions. They're going to be short. They're going to be stern. They're going to be commands. Follow them. Once you've been cleared out of a building, avoid being in the way. Stay in your containment zone. What's a containment zone? That's an area that between firefighters and has anything to say about anything is going to have established this area that they want everybody that's coming out of the building to go to so that we can have accountability. As law enforcement, we're going to want to talk to you. What did you see? What happened where you were at? We need to know that. We need to know that you're okay. We need accountability. The managers of the building are going to want to know where their people are. And in order to do that, we got to keep you in an area where we can accomplish that. It's important. It's important to stay in that area. You're not going to want to because it's going to take a while. It's not going to be a fast process. You're going to want to go home to your family. We need you to stay where we put you for the sole purpose of accountability and trying to keep the chaos down a little bit. You're no doubt going to have lots of questions. Did your buddy make it out? Are they injured? What hospital are they going to? All of these questions are extremely important to you, and it's rightfully so. I am not going to know the answer to that question. Neither is the other guy that's with me, or the firefighter that's with him, or anybody else in that building that's responding to this situation. Chances are they're not going to know, and if they are incorrect and they attempt to answer that, the chances are it's going to be wrong information. We're not going to have all the facts for a long time. So be patient. Be patient. I'm sure you want to know some answers to questions. You're going to have to give everybody a little bit of time so that they can get you the accurate information as opposed to giving you something that could make you even more upset or panic even further. And it could be inaccurate information. So please keep that in mind. We're not going to know the answers. All right, so when law enforcement arrives, I've mentioned this a few times, the difference between an active shooter and a mass shooting is the fact that an active shooter is ongoing at the time of the call. So what's that mean? Law enforcement, when they arrive on the scene of an active shooter, they're looking for someone shooting. That's what we're looking to stop. We're not going to have time to address the injured persons that are laying in the floor that I'm stepping over in order to get to the person that's attempting to cause more casualties. That is the goal. That is what we as law enforcement are trained to do. It's not that we don't care. It's not that we don't care that you're on the floor in pain, agony, or bleeding. It's simply we want to make sure that there's not any more of you than there absolutely has to be. That's our goal. We're looking for the person that's shooting. We're going to stop that shooter. And once that shooter has been isolated and stopped, that's whenever we're going to start doing things to address the citizens that are hurt. Once it's been neutralized, a team of law enforcement officers is going to start systematically clearing, and they're going to start making sure that there's no one shooting or killing in that room. And once they've established that there's no one shooting or killing in that room, that's going to be what we call a warm zone. In other words, it's not safe, but it's not as dangerous as where the shooting had been taking place last. That warm zone is where we're going to start collecting casualties. That's where we're going to start bringing the wounded. And once we start bringing the wounded in there and we've established these warm areas, these warm zones, that's whenever we're going to get with our firefighters, and we're working on this in the county, to establish RTF teams, which is Rescue Task Force. Rescue Task Force is a new thing that's been recently implemented in a lot of the areas, and we're implementing it here to have firefighters, EMS, and law enforcement working in conjunction with one another so that we can get the people that know how to put the IVs in and know how to do all the medical stuff in the building with us as quickly as possible. You do not want me to put an IV in you, I promise. That's what their job is. But I need to get them in there as safely as possible, and so we're developing that system. We're going to get them in there. They're going to start addressing on scene the issues in a priority. They're going to triage essentially in that area. And then it's going to be determined, getting ahead of myself. It's going to be determined where the staging area is for the transport. Transports are going to be done on a priority base. So whoever the medical guy that tells me this person's the first person that needs to go out, that's who's going out. That's who's going out first. And between law enforcement, firefighters, EMS, and you guys, yeah, we're going to recruit you guys too. If y'all aren't injured, I'm going to need your help to get the injured out. We don't have enough people a lot of times to handle that. So I might ask you, or fire might ask you, to address some of these wounded people and get them out to the ambulance. But we're going to try to get you away from the area into a staging area that's deemed safe so that we can get you to the treatment that you need as quickly as possible. Let's change gears. Let's look at why we have these situations. Situations like April 20th, 1999, Columbine, Colorado. Columbine High School, Littleton, Colorado. Two males 17 and 18 years old, kill 15 and wound 24. September 11, 2001, terrorist attack on the U.S. 19 Al-Qaeda hijackers kill 2,996, wound over 6,000. April 16, 2007, Virginia Tech, 23-year-old male, 33 dead, 23 injured. July 20th, 2012, Aurora, Colorado, Batman movie in the theater, 24-year-old male, kills 12, 70 injured, 70. Look at that, 58 of them from gunfire, and the rest were from the panic and the fact that he used tear gas. The rest of it was from panic, people trying to get out of the building, trampling one another, running over one another, clawing, fighting to get out of that building. December 14, 2012, Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook Elementary School, 20-year-old male, 28 dead, 2 wounded. December 2nd, 2015, San Bernardino, California, Department of Public Health Christmas party. 28-year-old male and a 29-year-old female. 14 dead, 22 wounded. October 1st, 2017, Las Vegas, Nevada, the Harvest Music Festival. 64-year-old male. 58 dead, 422 wounded from gunfire. 851 total wounded, including the panic. November 5th, 2017, Sutherland Springs, Texas, church shooting. 26-year-old male kills 26 dead, including an unborn child, and 20 were wounded. February 14, 2018, Parkland, Florida, Stoneman Douglas High School. 19-year-old male, 17 dead, 17 wounded. May 31st, 2019, Virginia Beach, municipal building, where the shooter worked. 40-year-old male, 13 dead, 4 wounded. You seeing the pattern here? Everybody see it? Everybody understand why we've got these situations? That's because there is no discernible pattern. There is no discernible pattern. Sure, there's some common facts here, We'll look at a few of those common facts, but the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is you don't know where it's going to be or who it's going to be. There's no gene that's embedded in your DNA that they found so far. They're looking for it. Trust me, they're looking for it. There's all kinds of studies looking at all these serial killers, trying to figure out what is it that causes them to do that. Some of it's mental illness. Yeah, we got some significant issues with mental illness, and that's a lot of times some of the precursors to mass killing are serial killers. But all in all, there's no set way to know who is capable of doing that. No discernible pattern. Commonalities. They're primarily male, primarily white. All of the incidents are horrific. All of the incidents are hate-filled. They're hate-filled. And all of them seek to do the most damage possible in the shortest amount of time possible because they know they don't have much time to get it done. So they're looking to impart as much damage as they possibly can. No set sign that shows who's capable of doing these types of murders. Women are not immune to it. Women are not immune to it. We look at the San Bernardino case that we just mentioned, 2015, 14 dead, 22 wounded. Female involved in that, 29-year-old. Grover Cleveland Elementary School, 1979, 2 dead, 9 wounded. Winnetka Elementary School, 1988, 1 dead, 5 wounded. They were shot by the woman. Look underneath that. See where it says poisoned Rice Krispie treats with arsenic. Prior to her going to the school and shooting these kids and the teacher, she laced Rice Krispie treats with arsenic and handed it out to kids and adults alike. A lot of people got sick. Fortunately, no one died from that particular incident from the arsenic-laced Rice Krispies, but look at that. Rice Krispie treats. Goleta Post Office, 2006, 6 dead. University of Alabama, 2010, 3 dead, 3 wounded. These are women. Women shooters. I reference Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman a lot. I've read a lot of his books. He is a retired military, and he does a lot of public speaking on topics similar to this. And I use a lot of his material whenever I put this together. Very, very good books. But one of the things that I took away that I wanted to kind of give you an idea about, we talk about desensitization. We're going to look at it from this angle. According to S.L.A. Marshall, who was in the military and also a military historian, he did research. And he looked at World War II, and he looked at the ratio of shooters, combatants, that actually pulled the trigger compared to those who didn't. These are trained military guys who are out on the field, on the battlefield, and the ratio of people who are willing to pull the trigger at the bad guy. Okay? Trained shooters. Pull the trigger at the bad guy. 15 to 20% was all that would do that. The rest of them refused to fire. 15 to 20% of your trained military in World War II refused to fire their weapon for one reason or another. Okay? That's not the hit ratio. That's the number of people willing to pull the trigger. Not too good. Military recognized that. They decided they were going to do something about it. They had to figure out why first. So they established research, and they started implementing some different training techniques. And in Korea, the rate of firing improved to 55%. Vietnam, it was as high as 95%. How did they do that? What did they do that changed World War II? 95% in the Vietnam War. They researched human resistance to kill other humans. People on the general do not enjoy killing other people. It's not something that they find fun. It's not a normal response for a normal person to want to kill another person. So the military had to look at it and they had to say, wait a minute. If people don't like killing people, how do we convince them to whenever we need them to on the battlefield? So what do? They replaced the bullseye target, the standard round circle target with all the rings, the 10 ring in the middle, that bullseye X ring in the middle. They replaced that target with a humanoid target, one that looks like a person. And you know what that did? That desensitized the military to the point where they could pull the trigger at the enemy. Now, we're not going to go into the statistics on how many pulled the trigger at the enemy, but aimed about 9 foot over their heads so that they didn't have to kill, but they shot. That's what we were looking at. The ability to overcome that resistance to kill to the point where you can at least engage the enemy in the battlefield. This is military tactics. Military tactics. We're teaching our soldiers and our Marines how to fight and kill on the battlefield. And the technique that we used was changing the target from a bullseye target to one that looks like a person. Well, police do the same thing. We have silhouette targets, shape of the torso of a human being, silhouette. And then we also have targets that look like I took a picture of you holding a gun at me as I'm shooting at you. And we use those targets and we replace the gun sometimes with a cell phone or a badge. And we use that to teach shooters, police officers, when to shoot and when not to shoot. But the idea is we have to overcome that human resistance to kill in order to get our guys that are responsible for taking a life sometimes to actually do it, to actually pull the trigger. There were other training techniques obviously involved, but the changing of the target was the most important. Today, the military and police use the lifelike targets. Some of the targets go so much as to when you engage them and you hit them, they actually will fall over for that instant response so that you can see your target fall whenever you shoot it. But we've gone a lot further than that now, because now we have simulators and have a two-dimensional screen where the shooter can engage a movie or a video of an actual human being reacting to your commands. So I can sit back here behind the desk and make the person on the screen respond based on what the officer's saying. I can make the person shoot. I can make the person comply. Very advanced technology. It's very cool. They've even gone further than that, though. They've now got 3D. I went to a training just a few months ago where they were trying to sell us some equipment. We're not buying it. But it's three-dimensional glasses. You put your glasses on and you're engaged in all these different scenarios to the effect of when you make a traffic stop, if it's a law enforcement officer, you make a traffic stop and you get out on the road and you make your approach to the vehicle, you're looking at the person in the driver's seat. If you turn your head and look, you realize that you have stepped too far out in traffic and the semi-truck just hit you as you were coming by. I mean, advanced technology, but think about that. Think about what we have to do and what we have done in order to desensitize our military and our police to allow them to pull the trigger when it's absolutely necessary. How much work it took to do that. So what in the world does that have to do with a mass shooter or an active shooter? I want you to think about this. Desensitization. That's what it took in order to get military and police capable of taking a human life. What can happen when people, especially children, are exposed to highly violent media on a daily basis? We're talking about movies, games, TV, music. What do you suppose happens to their brain whenever they're exposed to that on a daily basis? It's inevitable that they're going to be in violent acts. Movies that glorify vengeance, and don't get me wrong, please don't get me wrong. I love those action movies. I am a huge fan of them, love them. I'm not suggesting that everybody go home and burn their video collection. That's not what I'm saying at all, but please listen to me. Movies that glorify vengeance. You've got a guy that you're now rooting for, wronged in his earlier life, and he's out to make vengeance on everybody that did him wrong. And we're rooting for him. Yeah, go get him. Kill as many of them as you can. We've been desensitized to the point where that's normal. That's what we expect. That's what we want. Games that reward killing. You get bonus points if you get a headshot. If you can shoot somebody on the video game in the head, you get bonus points. You're looking for that high score. TV news that shows the mass killings and gives their killers fame. Think about that. Media, not a big fan. But the media, they put themselves out there to show you, the public, the deserving people, to understand what's going on. By that, they're giving those shooters fame. If you notice, I don't reference any of the names of the people that committed these atrocities because they don't deserve it. They don't deserve to be recognized. Those people are the lowest of the low. They don't deserve the recognition for committing those atrocities. But the media, they puts their face on the screen. You see the number of people they killed. And you know what that does to somebody that's got a problem? It gives them a goal for that next high score. They're going to make a little bit more effort to get more of those headshots so they get more bodies on the floor before they get killed or take themselves out. Music. I mean, listen to any music and you can hear just about anything you want, but some of it's worse than others. You're talking about gang violence. You're talking about violence in general, what they do to women. I mean, it's what your people, your kids are listening to. And it's not anything uncommon. That's just the way we live today. So it's not unreasonable to see that that could be one of the issues that we face. Couple this violence and the desensitization to the violence with a vulnerable person with possible predisposition to commit violence, and you have a ticking time bomb. The majority of persons that watch action movies and play shoot-'em-up games and listen to music and watch these horrific events on TV, they're not going to go out and kill somebody. They're not going to go take a gun into a building or a school and commit mass murder. But you need to think about what it's doing to your kids and what it's doing to us when we desensitize ourselves so that that is normal behavior. Let's consider the fact that they're now going into the workforce. I call it a device nanny, and I'm guilty of it too. I put my 5-year-old on a device nanny for the time that it takes me to cook dinner in the evening, but that's a lot of times a pacifier for kids these days. We'll give them a laptop or a cell phone, be like, here, go watch a YouTube video while I get dinner ready. Stop annoying me. I need you to leave me alone for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, hour, 3 hours, 4 hours, however long it is. I call it the device nanny. But these events, they occur in critical stages in our children's development. So it's not hard to believe that a child who has been exposed to violence, coupled with factors such as bullying, mental illness, a lack of coping mechanism, disconnected family life, et cetera, could, in their minds, justify actions such as school shootings. It's not completely out of the realm. If that's all you've known and that's normal to you, how can you say that it's not normal for them to act out what they've been exposed to their entire life? Now consider that these kids are growing up. We're going to give them a life now. We've made it through school, out in the workforce, but they've never really developed these appropriate coping mechanisms to deal with their troubles. Let's give them a job, and let's say they got married. Normal life, just going through life, just like you and I. Now we throw them a curveball. We're going to give them a divorce. We're going to fire them. That ticking time bomb that we had from childhood just got detonated with a resulting life tragedy that they have no ability to cope with. They don't have the ability to take action that would be appropriate to the situation. The change in their life was a trigger. We'll use that word a lot, but a trigger that initiates a response that had been repressed up to that point. Now you have a person capable of murder going to exact revenge on everyone for wrongs done to them, because that's the only way they know how. Let me draw your attention back to my table. Anybody see anything different about these weapons in the last hour and 10, 15 minutes? Anybody notice anything? Nothing happened. They didn't load themselves. They didn't put themselves together. They didn't rack around into the chamber. They didn't indiscriminately fire into the crowd trying to kill as many people as possible. They laid right there on that table, fully capable, fully functional weapons laid right there on that table, and they didn't move. Regardless of your view on gun control, and I'm not here to debate it, I'm not going to even tell you what my opinion is on gun control. Regardless of your view on gun control, you need to understand that the situations we face in active shooter, mass shootings, and workplace violence, it's not a gun problem. It's not a gun problem. It's a human problem. It's a person problem. The guns are merely tools, albeit deadly tools. They're deadly tools, and in the wrong hands, they can enact a lot of violence. A lot of things can go wrong with those if they're put in the wrong hands. Don't get me wrong. But they cannot function without a person behind them. They cannot aim. They cannot pull the trigger. They cannot load themselves. They are not the culprit. The person behind them is the culprit. They're the person that kills. The guns didn't do it. People did it. We have to address people. We have to learn how to address people. We need to look for those signs. Consider the fact that in this room at exactly 2:17 p.m. today, with everybody sitting in here, detonated 3 bombs. 3 bombs. 2 of them are attached to 1-gallon accelerant cans. They have a pipe bomb associated with it. Inside that pipe bomb is about 800 ball bearings. So now you got fire and you got metal shards going in every direction indiscriminately. In the back of the building, I had about 4 different bombs put together, set on a timer, all capable of killing mass numbers of people. It's not a gun. It doesn't take a gun to kill somebody. It takes a person to kill somebody. There's countless ways to do it. Guns just happen to be one of the tools that they use, and it's a common tool. Don't get me wrong, it's a common tool. You hear about it all the time. I'm not discrediting the fact that guns are used to kill people. They are. But it's not the problem. The way we have people in society that haven't been dealt with appropriately for their entire life and not being able to address that, that's part of the problem. That is the problem. Remember the female murderer who laced the Rice Krispie treats with arsenic? That's not a gun. It doesn't take more than a couple clicks on the internet to figure out what chemicals you've got in your household that you can mix together, and at the very least, I can make everybody in here sick if I don't kill everybody. It doesn't take long. There's hundreds and hundreds of ways to enact violence. All it takes is a committed person. That's all it takes. Just something to think about. So what can we expect? We can expect, unfortunately, and I agree with Lieutenant Colonel Grossman on this as well, we can expect more of the same at a higher frequency, more often. We should expect that the targets are going to become increasingly tragic. What do I mean by that? I mean that they're going to become bigger targets. We're going to talk about stadiums. We're going to talk about mass gatherings such as protests or concerts. Look at Nevada. Think about protests. If I've got a group of people that don't like another group of people and that group of people happens to be congregating on the lawn, what's the best way to get rid of as many of them as I possibly can? Go to where they're meeting. There we're going to focus on softer targets. Softer targets. What are softer targets? Schools, preschools, buses, churches. They're already doing that, folks. They're already doing that. But look at that. We see schools. We see elementary schools. Sandy Hook. Horrible, horrible incident. Now picture that being a preschool. Picture that being the innocent of the innocent, the babies. Picture that somebody goes in and destroys the lives of little babies in a preschool. How many mothers, or fathers for that matter, could the next day justify taking their kid to a preschool after something like that happens? Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10, maybe it's a terrorist attack and they've hit our softest targets. How many people are going to take their kids to preschool that next day? Now think about what that does economically. We just took a quarter of the workforce out because they're not taking their kids to school. Somebody's got to stay at home. Think about the huge impact that these events can have. And they're coming. This falls back on the desensitization again. This is the third part of the desensitization. And that is that the bad guy, they know we're calloused. They know that what they do in the government building is not going to hit us as hard as what they do in the elementary school. So guess what their target's going to be? The elementary school. Because they're trying to get you to hurt and to feel that pain for as long as is physically, humanly possible. That's their goal. They're going to hit our children and our churches. It's horrible, horrible, horrible to think about, but look at the news. It's a trend. So we talk about some of the things that we can do. What can we do in immediate action? Prepare. Prepare as best you can for the events that you hope you never see other than on the screen. Teach our kids how to protect themselves as well. Don't leave them out. Teach them how to protect themselves in school. See something, say something. We're going to go over that in detail in just a little bit, but keep that in mind. Let's look at long-term action. Parent and coach our kids to respect the laws, respect for others, acknowledging differences. Give them coping mechanisms. Teach them how to talk. Communication is not necessarily the abbreviation in a text message. Teach them how to talk. Learn how to express emotions. Give them coping mechanisms. Avoid overexposure to violence. Teach them how to lose. Not everybody is going to win all the time. You've got to let them know that. And winning all the time is going to make it losing that much harder whenever real life hits them. All right, before we go into this, let me just read the teaching our kids what we're going to expect. It's not going to change until we have a culture change. And a culture change, if it happened today, if no one watched another violent movie, if there was never any more violence on the news, if there was never another song that was sung about how to kill hundreds of people, there was never another video game played, it would take 18 years before we ever saw improvement. It's not going to change, folks. It's not going to change, but we have to be prepared for it. You've got to be looking out for it. So let's go to see something, say something. What do I mean by that? When y'all walked in here, how many of you saw that the doors were chained? How many of you thought that was weird? How many of you said, hey, that's weird. Why are the doors chained? You did? Outstanding. Did you get a good answer? Did you get a good answer? But you're still sitting in here. Hey, look. I make a joke of it because y'all came here for this class that's going to talk about this event, this exact stuff, okay? What I want to draw attention to is the fact that indiscriminately in this building were 3 bags that didn't have an owner. 3 bags that didn't have an owner. And inside those bags happened to be bombs. The doors were chained shut. How many exits are there in this building? In this particular building, this room in this building? 2 on the side, right? I know you know. 2 on the side. The back doors, right? There's a pipe bomb on each one of those. Those are locked down. The only other one is back here behind the stage down through the fire building. But I'm standing up here with a bunch of guns. So there's really no escape. And yet when you came into this building, you saw those bags. You saw the doors were chained. You saw that I'm walking down the hall carrying a big old black bag that doesn't make much sense for a class that we're going to be doing PowerPoint. All these things are coming through your head, and yet you're still sitting here. You didn't act. You didn't ask the questions to figure out whether, hey, is that suspicious or not? And again, guys, I'm not saying that this particular event, I just want you to think about it for the future. Think about what is suspicious. If you see something suspicious, say something. Figure out what it is. Should it be suspicious? Why do we hesitate to make that call or ask those questions? Why? I'll tell you why, because we're too busy. We don't want to be that person that's always annoying and it's like, oh my God, the world's ending. The world is ending. Or we dismiss it as, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. The stairs probably fell off. We don't want anybody to break their neck when they go out the door. Speaking of which, I'm not sure those stairs are going to last much longer, just FYI. Be careful if you go out that door. And you don't want to be the person that says, hey, I'm just paranoid. I'm just paranoid, Dad. I've watched too many movies. Things are happening. No big deal. It's human nature. But I guarantee you this. The people involved in the Virginia Tech shooting wish they had said something when they saw those doors getting chained the first time. Did y'all know that? Those doors were chained twice. The first time was a dry run. People saw that and they were like, that's weird. Nobody said anything. The second time was the time that he shot everybody. I guarantee you they wish they had said something. So what are we talking about here? Suspicious circumstances, suspicious packages, suspicious persons, suspicious. What is that? What is suspicious? What constitutes suspicious? All right, we're going to reference another one of my books here, The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. If you have not read it, read it. It's a really good book. It's a really good read, and it will open your eyes to listen to that voice in the back of your head. Pay attention to it. Listen to yourself. A lot of times your brain picks up on things that it sees in and around you that maybe you ignore. You've trained yourself to dismiss that. You see it. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You're thinking in your head, hey, something doesn't seem right, but you dismiss that because you've trained yourself to dismiss that, and you miss it. And sometimes that's deadly. Ultimately, you're the only person that can determine whether or not something's suspicious to you or not. However, not everything is a SWAT call-out, okay? Not everything that you see constitutes calling fire and EMS and 911 and bring SWAT and K9 and call in the FBI and SRT and everybody else. Call them in. Not everything constitutes that, but I tell you how you figure it out. Being aware, looking at the situation, you can determine often whether it's a legitimate concern or not. Ask people questions. Ask people around you. Ask somebody that works in the building, hey, is there a reason that door's chained? Maybe they haven't even seen it yet. Maybe they're going to investigate a little bit further, and maybe that solidifies the fact, hey, that ain't supposed to be that way. Do your own little bit of investigating, figure out whether or not it's something that you need to really be concerned about, and then if it is, act on it. Give you an example of a suspicious circumstance. Vehicle sits in the rear of the parking lot, idling, extended amount of time. No one's coming in or out of it, just sitting there in the back of the parking lot. Vehicle continues to circle the area. You've seen that car go by at least 10 times in the last 30 minutes. Box truck parked in an unusual location, not at a loading dock, no delivery scheduled. Person's taking pictures of video. Why are they doing that? Ask those questions. You've got every right to know. They might tell you to go off. None of your business. That's fine, but at least you're inquiring about it. You can figure out a lot of things by just looking around, thinking about it. Suspicious packages. Hey, if it's ticking, don't kick it, please. Something out of place with no obvious owner, i.e. my backpacks that I had scattered around the room. Unscheduled delivery. Suspicious person. You know, that masked guy in the back of the room, right? The one that everybody should be looking at? No, we're not looking for those. What does a suspicious person look like? What does an active shooter look like? What does a mass murderer look like? Look to your left and to your right. That's what they look like. They look like you and me. But there's some things to look at that can help you figure it out. Person's dressed inappropriately for the weather. If I was up here in a parka walking around and it's 102 degrees in here, I'm pretty sure, that wouldn't seem normal. That wouldn't be right. It'd be a little suspicious. Person's carrying large bags out of place. Not talking about going to the gym. A lot of people carry bags into the gym. Not everybody's carrying a bomb. Lingering. If I'm standing around in an area that I don't belong and just kind of hanging out, might be something to investigate, talk about, look into. If I'm confrontational when you try to, maybe that's a clue. And avoids contact. So if you start walking towards me and I start walking away, hey, why are you not wanting to talk to me? Something to think about. That's when you call and say, hey, this just happened. Maybe send somebody over, take a look at them, see what they're up to. Let's move on to the employee portion of this. We're going to reference the book again by Gavin DeBecker, chapter 9. He goes over a lot of good points, but we're not talking about like at work, that annoys you at work. We're talking about the next person that could potentially be the next Virginia Beach shooter. Some ideas on how to keep in mind some things that you can look for. Again, we're never going to know for sure, but these are some trigger ideas, some trigger points that could be looked at. A lot of times we have significant warning signs, but we're, as human beings, not willing to acknowledge them as such. We don't want to be the person that makes the mistake and falsely accuses somebody or causes trouble. It's always better to address the issue early as opposed to letting them work themselves out, because typically they don't work themselves out. They just get worse and worse and worse. Make your reports or concerns to the boss, and if you are the boss, make sure you follow up and report the behavior. Investigate and act. If there's a need to fire an employee, do so. Don't put it off, because dragging it out can make it more difficult to accomplish in the long run. Be considering a few of the following points. Don't insult the don't insult the dignity of the individual. Make the termination complete and final. Do not negotiate. Do not rehash the past. and for reasons, or the past reasons for termination, they should have already been addressed prior to. Be directed to the point. Cite general reasons for termination. Don't be specific, because sometimes that will result in a counseling. Look, this is really not working out for you, and it's certainly not working out for the company, so we're going to part ways here. Why don't you go ahead and tell me where you want your mail forwarded? And by the way, if you're going to use us for references, how would you like for us to address this termination? Give them options to make them feel like they're involved in the process, but give them no opportunity to question the process. Use surprise to your advantage. Obviously, you don't want to call your employee that you're going to fire and say, hey, next Wednesday at office, you're going to get fired. Because what's that going to do? It's going to give anybody that has the potential to cause violence or harm time to plan it out, think about it, bring the right equipment to go do what they need to do. Timing should be at near the end of the day. And choose an appropriate setting. Make sure you have the right people with you. A termination should be ideally completed by the person one higher than the supervisor, the immediate supervisor. DeBecker uses an acronym JACA when discussing workplace violence. JACA is what an individual who is debating whether or not they're going to be the next workplace violent shooter is going to go through in his or her mind prior to doing it, based on his research. And that is justification. Can the employee justify his actions? They took my life away when they fired me. So in his mind, he's justified his actions that he's about to take. Alternatives. Can the employee find anything that could potentially give them an alternative to this violence? In other words, can they sue you for wrongful termination? If they feel that they can, that's a good thing, because that means they still think there's alternatives to the violence. If they can't, if they feel like they're trapped and the only option that they have is violence, then we're in trouble. Consequences. Dependent on the frame of mind of the individual will determine whether or not they can find the consequences of an action. Is it worth it? And the ability. Oftentimes an angry person that's angry at the boss or the person at work that's their main target will be so angry and so dismayed and so intent on inflicting harm to that individual that they have these grandiose ideas that, you know what, I'm just going to take them all out with me. And that's what you wind up having. The person that was originally responsible for the anger becomes the main target, but they realize that their life is over, and so everybody that's done them wrong in their life, they're going to take out with them. Things to look for triggers, warning signs. We're talking about mood changes, confrontational, argumentative. Anybody that works with me would say that that is a danger sign for me every day. They would say that that is probably me in a nutshell. But we're talking about the things that people notice as an actual change in the demeanor of the individual. Mental illness. A lot of people aren't going to talk to you about their mental situations, but if you happen to be aware of someone who's having some mental issues or some difficulties with some medical things that are going on, be aware of it to the best of your ability, and then make note of it. If they start to act differently, maybe they've come off their medication and it might be something that needs to be addressed. Health issues such as alcoholism or cancer. Sometimes a terminal illness will affect people differently, and their decision to take rash action becomes a lot more feasible when they realize they don't have anything to live for anymore. Family disruptions such as divorce, death in the family, or domestic violence. Employment status change. They got fired, or they got transferred against their will. Something that changed that they weren't looking for. Disciplinary actions such as write-up. Legal trouble. Have they been arrested? Domestic situations, DUIs, things that just alter your life the way you're used to living it. If something comes about that alters that, you can bet that it's going to have an impact on them. And somebody that's unstable to start with, who's already dealing with this controversy on whether or not they're going to do something or not, that might be the trigger that sets them off. Financial issues, bankruptcy, foreclosure, repossession of a vehicle. All right, we're going to shift gears again. Let's talk about concealed carry. Every class that I've ever taught regarding active shooter discusses concealed carry. That's always the question I get at the end. Should we have concealed carry? Should I conceal carry? Got a very good answer for you. Because I'm speaking for the sheriff's office and because I'm speaking for me, I'm not going to answer that question. That's a personal decision. You have to make that decision. You have to decide whether or not concealed carry is right for you, for your family, for your business, for whatever it is. You're the person that's responsible. And that's what we're going to talk about briefly in mentioning and making the decision. You need to understand that the responsibility falls heavy on the person pulling the trigger. You are responsible for the rounds that come out of your weapon or your gun. You have to know when and where it is authorized to use that lethal force, and you have to ensure you don't accidentally shoot anyone that doesn't deserve it. If you conceal carry, great. That's great. But you're responsible for everything that you do with that weapon. Accuracy is critical. Can you hit your target? Are you comfortable firing at a bad guy in a crowded area? Could anybody in here comfortably turn around and shoot anybody else in here if they happen to be the bad guy without hitting the other people? That's something that you know. I don't. I don't know whether you can or not. If you have trouble understanding that, picture your family member standing right next to the shooter and then decide whether or not you'd take that shot or not. Maybe you would. Maybe you wouldn't. It's a decision that you and only you can make. From what distance can you make that shot? If you decide, yeah, I can do that, yeah, it's only like half a football field. I can hit them with a .22 pistol. You got to know your limitations. Can you shoot under stress? So, on a conservative average for law enforcement, law enforcement who are engaged in a shoot or a stressful situation, they typically lose about 30% of their accuracy. So that means if I'm a 100% shooter, and I'm not saying that I'm a 100% shooter, but if I'm a 100% shooter out on the range and I'm qualifying for the range and I shoot 100, in this statistic, if I'm in a situation where it's stressful and where I'm having to make a decision on whether I'm going to take that person's life or not, my accuracy just dropped 30%, like that. That's an average, not everybody. Some people are a lot worse. Some people, it doesn't affect at all. But on average, that's what you're looking at, 30% reduction in non-stress shooting. We practice at least twice a year where we have to qualify. If you're going to conceal carry, you need to consider how often do you practice. And then keep this in mind. When law enforcement comes to an area where there's been an active shooter, I'm looking for the person holding the gun. I'm looking for the person holding the gun. So what's that mean? That means if you happen to have found yourself in a position where you, a concealed carry person, has taken out the bad guy, they're laying at your feet in a pool of blood because you saved the world. And I, the law enforcement officer, come walking through that door and I see you standing over somebody with a gun pointed at them and there's blood everywhere. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to take out the threat. I will drive the vehicle that pulls the float that has you on it waving to the crowd. You killed the bad guy. Don't make me a pallbearer. Don't have that weapon in your hand whenever I come in the room. So secure the bad guy, get the weapons away from him, and have nothing in your hand when I come in. Please, if you conceal carry, make that a priority. Take care of the threat, take care of business, but make sure you don't have that in your hand whenever I come through that door. I'd feel real bad about it. We've made mention of a hard and soft target, but what is meant by that? Let's look at it. Vulnerability. Vulnerability is the difference between a soft target and a hard target. A hard target is much less vulnerable than a soft target. Makes sense, right? Part of being a hard target sometimes is being a strong survivor, having the mental mindset to stay alive. We've gone over the mental mindset a lot with regard to your willingness to fight for your life. That's a class that could be 8 hours long for a week. I would love to teach it to you. I'd love to develop that class, but that's not this class. Mindset is huge whenever you're dealing with anything in life, especially a life or death situation. How do we harden ourselves in our environment? Well, I'm glad you asked. Have a plan and practice it. Practice it. You can write out a plan. You can have a plan in your mind that would be the most ideal situation for you to avoid getting shot in this building. You walk through it. At the very least, walk through it and see what doors are actually going to be available to you, what access you're going to have to a building that's able to provide you cover. You're not going to know. You have to practice what you preach. So put it down on paper and then act it out. And do it more than once. Do it periodically throughout the year. It doesn't have to be some extravagant event where you have, reenactments or anybody has to be aware of what you're even doing. Walk through and figure out exactly how you would get out of a situation. If you listen to the interview of anybody that's been in a shoot, whether it's law enforcement or military, or been in a situation really where they had to act a certain way, the majority of them will tell you they went into autopilot. They responded to the situation based on their training, based on what they had trained to do. They essentially, autopilot, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just going through the motions because I've practiced it so much that that's what's normal to me. You as a citizen, you as a civilian, you have to have some form of an autopilot button for yourself in order to survive these situations. Don't let the situation be the first time you've thought about it. What you're going to do. The what if game. Like I told you, I had academies, I had self-defense classes, and all of them I really preached the what if game. So for my law enforcement cadets, I would tell them, all right, we just did a traffic stop. You just went up to the car, you issued a summons, you're back in your car, that car's pulled away, you're on the road now and you're waiting for your next call or your next incident. What I want you to do is I want you to envision that call, that stop didn't go that way. Envision that when you got out of your vehicle and you made your approach to the vehicle for the first time to talk to that individual, they turned around and they started shooting at you. How would you have responded to that? Would you have been prepared for it? Would you have had a mindset to do what was necessary in order to survive that situation? Play those what-if games in any scenario you can dream up. So for my women's class for the self-defense, I would express to them the importance of when you're at the mall shopping at Christmas and you come out and it's dark and you walk to your car, being ready for anything and everything that could potentially happen to you is extremely important. So when you walk by that guy that's walking through the parking lot going to the store and he doesn't do anything because he's just going to the store to get a Christmas gift, when you get to your car and you're safely in your vehicle driving home, I want you to pretend that didn't go that way. I want you to pretend that they turned around and they tried to grab your arm. What are you going to do? How would you have responded to that circumstance? How would you have responded to that situation? How would you have survived that? That's the what-if game. What do we need to know here? You incorporate that into your daily zone-out time, the time that it takes from your house to work, your lunch time. When you're sitting there at the computer and you're pretending to read the third email for the third time for the day and you're really bored and you're trying to entertain yourself for the next half hour before lunch, think about it. Play the what-if game. Anything. What would you do? Have access to a go bag. I'm not talking about the rucksack full of guns, grenades, and parachutes. We don't need that. I'm not suggesting that you go out and buy that. It's up to you. But the go bag needs to be specific to your environment. It doesn't have to be big, but have some way to stop your door. In other words, if you're in an office building and you have a doorway, have some means of securing that door. Whether it's a door stop, if your door opens inward, a door stop's great. You kick it underneath the door, and that's going to prevent them from coming in, at least with easy access. If you don't, you got a return on your door. Maybe put something in your go bag that will allow you to limit access to you. Have a tourniquet and personal medication, because if you bunker down and it takes us a few hours to get to you, if you're on a regimen of medication that's important for your health and well-being, have a little bit extra in your go bag so that you've got it there accessible and you might be able to go those fewer hours without having any medical issues with that. I would include a tourniquet, and like I said, you don't have to have any kind of special training from the aspect of being a nurse or a doctor or EMS. You can take that training, learn how to apply a tourniquet, learn the differences between the tourniquets. The best one that we found for self-application is the CAT tourniquet. It's got a little windlass on it that you can turn for yourself and actually stop the bleeding on your own self. They don't work on small people like children or the extremely older people due to issues with the size of the arm and skin and things like that. So, they've got different tourniquets out there like a SWAT T, but you can look that up for yourself. But just consider the fact that tourniquets can save lives, and it's one of the easiest things to apply that stops the bleeding that causes people to die. Maybe some pepper spray, maybe a flashlight. Just think about the things that you would essentially need in order to survive that situation. And then train. Keep yourself informed. Take self-defense classes. Learn first aid. Learn how to apply a tourniquet and apply direct pressure to stop the bleeding. Learn CPR. And then talk, discuss scenarios with coworkers, encourage office drills. If you're in a management position, or even if you're not, the county had a webinar a few weeks ago, and I attended it. And the company that was doing the webinar in their logic behind what they called the red ball exercise. So here I am coming up to you at your desk, and I hand you a red ball. That red ball means nothing more than, hey, we're going to have a conversation about an incident that I have for you, a scenario. And you and I are going to sit down and we're going to discuss what you would do in that circumstance, how you would respond to it, and what we as a company or we as a business or division can do to better the safety for everybody in that room. A lot of policies were changed based on the information that they were able to glean from that. People that you wouldn't expect to have an idea have great ideas, and they're able to implement that into their policies and procedures. And initiate discussions with your people based on a scenario and learn together. All right, conclusion. Run, hide, fight. You have options. You have options. Based on your situation, based on the scenario, you need to know what those options are, where they lead you, what you can do to make them happen. Know what to do in the situation and think about it before it happens. Know when to call 911 and what to say from a safe place, right? Never assume anything. Never assume anything. Report only what you know is accurate. Location, description, anything that can help me as law enforcement respond adequately and directly to the threat. Understand what law enforcement is going to do. We're going to end the threat as quickly as possible. Please obey the commands that are given to you. Please understand that it's not personal. Please understand that it's not something I enjoy doing whenever I step over you in order to go past you to find the threat while you're sitting there bleeding in pain. I want to help you as quickly as I can, but I got to make sure that that person is no longer a threat before we can do that safely for everybody. Don't have anything in your hands whenever law enforcement arrives, gun, keys, or cell phone. Stay out of the way and don't ask questions. Why we have these events, hopefully I've illustrated in some detail the fact that we are not going to be able to 100% determine why people do the things that they do. There's no telltale sign that it illustrates who the next shooter is going to be, or what building it's going to be in, or who's going to be responsible for it, or what town it's going to be in, or what city it's going to be in, or what state it's going to be in. It could be anywhere at any time. Hopefully we've given you some ideas, though, as to what kind of triggers to look for in people. And hopefully you understand coming away from this that regardless of your opinion on gun laws and gun safety and gun regulation, the fact is the gun doesn't pull the trigger, that it's a human problem. It's a human person that we have to be concerned about. And what they do with their knowledge and their commitment to cause harm is what's going to hurt you and me and everybody else. We've got to look at that and not the fact that the tools that are available. See something, say something, err on the side of caution, and always listen to your gut. If something seems off, try to determine if it is, and then make the call that could save your life or others. Dealing with problem employees and workplace violence, be aware of the changes in mood or demeanor. Be aware of potential triggers. Report, document, and act. Report, document, and act. Concealed carry, you are responsible. Do not let the revolver in your pocket give you a false sense of bravado. Practice and know your limitations. Being a hard target, train, train, train. There's no substitute to training. Be prepared, not paranoid. Play the what-if game and be a strong survivor. Have that mental mindset that you're going to survive the circumstance, you're going to survive the situation. You are responsible for your own safety. Be prepared in every situation, and survival is a mindset. And with that, I leave you with 10 minutes for questions. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attentiveness.
Lance, thanks again for a great training, lots of great information. A little bit disturbing, yeah, but I think that was part of the goal here, to kind of wake us up, because we have become desensitized, unfortunately, due to many incidents that have happened over the months and years. But at the same time, a light touch on some of the issues. So, we'll balance there, and a slight bit of humor occasionally. Take a deep breath. Relax. In all likelihood, this will not happen in our wonderful community. But now you are better equipped than you were when you came in here to respond to whatever might happen. You also have some information you might share with your family members, whether they're in this community or in another community, because we want to encourage people to be active in their own self-defense and preservation. And so to that end, this was the outline. This is the information we're sharing with everybody. Each of you is in your own work situation. You're in your own building, or you rove about the community. So these particular strategies apply generally, but we'll have follow-up on the particulars of your building, right? So you need to know what you need to do in your building. What are your exits? Who do you pass on the way out the door? Who will you take with you? Where will you go? The woods, the parking lot, another building across the street. That's all going to be determined by where you work, right? So we're going to have some follow-up. We've already done a little bit of pre-planning on that, but it's going to be particular to your situation. And we've also proposed in the board's upcoming budget adjustments some additional funding that we could use to make some building hardening adjustments potentially. So we have some differences in our facilities. If you look at the panic bars in this, they're the new style where you can't chain them shut. Lance had his fancy magnet chains on there for display. They're not actually going to stop you, but they look like they could. But if you go into administration building, those are the old style panic bars, kind of an open space, right? That's the perfect kind of thing to put a chain in there to chain them shut. So things like that we need to work to remove. Then we also have in this building, we have key card access. Administration, we don't. We need to think about that and think about having a system that works across the organization. And then if it works across the organization, we can equip our law enforcement folks with the right tools so they can get in any of them in the right way. So we need to think through that kind of stuff. Panic alarms, cameras, any of those kind of tools. We need to be smart about it. We can't, equip every building with every single device that you can think of. Why? Because we serve the public. We're never going to get away from that. We're not Capital One over at West Creek, where they can have guards. Nobody gets in. Employees are in gated parking lots. They have swipe badges to get in. You can't go in and see anybody there unless you come through a guard. Then you go into a lobby, you sign, you provide an ID, you get an escort. None of that can we really do here. And we may have some places where we want to put that, like parts of the courthouse, where prisoners are. Maybe our wastewater plants are going to be harder target, if you will, in that. And the public doesn't need to go there. But it's going to take us a little bit of work to kind of reconcile this stuff. But at the end of the day, we're not going to make our offices a place where the public can't come to do business. That's just not in the nature of the service we provide. So we're going to equip ourselves with these ideas. We're going to train. We're going to be aware of what we can do, and we'll have the best approaches for our situation, and that's our goal. So with that, we got a little bit of time for questions. There were a couple last time, and Lance will be sure happy to take them. There are employees who conceal carry. Yeah, it's not lawful, to my understanding, for us to prohibit firearms in our building. Questions? The courthouse has some additional, we can do some things there. Other questions? We had a good crowd this morning. We have a good crowd now. I feel like we've provided a good first significant step in equipping folks to deal with a serious matter, but don't let it bring you down. Again, we have a great community here, and we're not asking you, in fact, we're encouraging you not to be paranoid, just to be smart and prepared, right? And we do have one more question. Yes, so, recently we had fire extinguisher training and AED training. So how many folks went through that? Raise your hand. So that's a good number. So we'll continue to provide appropriate training across the organization. I don't know exactly what the run, hide, fight particulars of each facility will look like yet, but the concept will be not unlike the fire extinguisher and AED, where we'll have small group kind of discussions in each facility to kind of do some walkthroughs about what are the options here, and if there are some issues we need to deal with, like I think, Lance, you said the stairwell.
I'm joking about that.
We may need to double check that. Make sure if we find out that there's a sticky door, or an exit that doesn't work right, or something like that, we'll try to work through those. So look for that to come over the next several weeks. We'll do it kind of building by building. Well, again, I thank y'all for coming, and let's give Lance another round of applause.
My pleasure. I appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Oh, I got you.